Think about the post-war era of Japan. For decades, the nation stood as a unique anomaly in global affairs. It built an economic powerhouse while maintaining a constitution that explicitly renounced war. This was the doctrine of exclusively defense-oriented policy. It meant the military existed only to protect the islands, never to project power abroad. But the world has changed. The global order is fracturing, alliances are shifting, and Japan is recalibrating its stance. Here is the thing. When a nation decides to spend more on security, it does not just buy new equipment, it changes the flow of money through the entire economy. We are looking at a strategic pivot to counter a fracturing global order. This shift is driven by the erosion of Japan's tech hegemony and the legacy of the Plaza Accords, which created economic vulnerabilities that accelerate the need for a more robust defense posture. But when you redirect billions of dollars from the civilian economy into defense procurement, you create immediate friction. Consider the supply chain. In the modern world, defense is not separate from industry, it is woven into it. The same factories that build the engines for commercial cars also produce the guidance systems for missiles. The same silicon wafers that power smartphones also run the radar systems for patrol vessels. When the government announces a massive increase in defense spending, it does not open a new factory overnight. It competes for the same resources. This creates a bottleneck. Let us look at the semiconductor sector. Japan is a critical node in the global chip supply chain. It produces the specialized materials and equipment that allow other nations to manufacture processors. Now imagine the domestic demand spikes. The Ministry of Defense needs advanced chips for autonomous systems, communication networks, and electronic warfare. The civilian market needs advanced chips for consumer electronics, automotive systems, and data centers. Both sectors are fighting for the same limited output. When demand outstrips supply, prices rise. This is the inflation risk. It is not just about the cost of the weapons, it is about the cost of everything else that uses that technology. This dynamic is particularly acute in the automotive industry. Japan is famous for its car manufacturing, but modern vehicles are essentially computers on wheels. They rely heavily on the same semiconductor infrastructure that powers the defense sector. If the defense budget absorbs a significant portion of the available advanced silicon, the cost of producing cars increases. Manufacturers face higher input costs. They may have to slow down production lines while waiting for components, or they may pass those costs on to the consumer. This creates a ripple effect through the broader economy. You might wonder why this shift is happening now. It is not a sudden cultural abandonment of post-war ideals. It is a pragmatic reinterpretation of the pacifist constitution. Historical oral histories and generational gaps reveal a disconnect between wartime memories and current security anxieties. Older generations remember the war. Younger generations remember the peace. The reinterpretation of Article 9 in 2014 allowed for collective self-defense. This challenged the post-war constitutional ban on war. But it also opened the door for a fusion of traditional cultural identity with modern tech infrastructure to reshape national narratives around sovereignty. The transition involves a complex mix of nationalism and industrial policy. Historians like Oleg Benesh have pointed to the role of martial culture and nationalism in this shift. Karen Abe has noted that this is framed as a cultural preservation issue regarding wartime oral histories. But the economic reality is distinct. The erosion of Japan's tech hegemony means they can no longer rely on the United States for security guarantees alone. They need an independent defense posture. This means domestic procurement. It means buying Japanese. But here is the catch. Domestic procurement requires capacity. If the domestic capacity is already maxed out serving civilian needs, the defense sector cannot get what it needs without taking it from somewhere else. This is where the procurement bottlenecks become visible. It is not just about waiting for steel or rubber. It is about waiting for the specialized microchips that define modern warfare. These are high-value, high-complexity items. There is no surplus, there is only allocation. This creates a specific economic vulnerability. The Plaza Accords of the 1980s weakened the yen and shifted manufacturing focus. That legacy has created economic vulnerabilities that accelerate the need for a more robust, independent defense posture. But that same posture relies on the industrial base that the Accords helped reshape. It is a circular problem. The economy needs the defense sector to secure its trade routes. The defense sector needs the economy to fund its expansion. When you push on one side, the other side compresses. We see this in the future implications. Japan will increasingly act as a geopolitical stabilizer in Asia, moving from a passive security guarantor to an active defense partner amidst global instability. This is the strategic pivot, but the cost is measured in inflation and supply constraints. The civilian sectors that powered the Japanese miracle are now sharing the stage with the military. The competition for talent, materials, and capital will intensify. Think about it as a tug of war. One side is the government demanding security. The other side is the market demanding growth. As the government pulls harder, the market feels the strain. The semiconductor industry faces a choice. Do they prioritize the defense contract with guaranteed government funding? Or do they prioritize the civilian market with higher volume but lower margins? This decision shapes the availability of chips for the rest of the world. The narrative around sovereignty is shifting. It is no longer just about protecting the islands. It is about protecting the supply lines that keep the islands fed and powered. This requires a more active defense partner, but it also requires a more resilient industrial base. If the industrial base is strained by defense spending, the resilience weakens. That is the paradox. To secure the future, you risk the present economy. This is not a simple trade-off. It is a structural realignment. The fusion of traditional cultural identity with modern augmented reality and tech infrastructure is reshaping how the nation views its own capabilities. But the numbers do not lie. Defense spending is money spent. It is not money saved. When you redirect that money into a sector that competes for the same inputs as the civilian economy, you create friction. You create inflation. You create bottlenecks. The consensus in the available analysis is that Japan is moving toward increased military capability. But the causal link to the fracturing global order is complex. It is driven by strategic necessity rather than sudden cultural change. The historical context matters. The generational gaps matter. But the economic mechanics matter more. If you want to understand the impact of this shift, look at the factory floor. Look at the semiconductor plant. Look at the auto assembly line. That is where the real cost of security is paid. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.